Hello again and welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons. I'm your host. I'm glad you're joining me today. Um, so this week's taken a little bit of a turn. I mean, we went from crazy high 80s, 90s, super hot to in the 60s yesterday. It was only 55 this morning. Today is Tuesday when I'm taping. I was out bright and early up at the crack of dawn with Dan to go up and help hopefully Senator-elect Booten at the polls in Ward 1 this morning, and it was brisk. I've still got layers on. It hard to believe that it's late July. I'm sure it'll change in days. I'm actually enjoying the cool weather. We have so many projects going on around our house. For those of you who know me well, I know that Dan purchased a house that had been vacant for like 4 years. So we've been doing renovations for the past 3 or 4 months, and landscaping, things like that, fencing. When it's hot out, it makes it a little difficult. But we're getting there, and like I said, a couple days with some rain and some cooler temperatures were much appreciated in our household. Today, I want to talk about city growth. There was an article in the paper either yesterday or today or maybe even the day before that talked about potential development down on in Ward 8 over in the south part of Manchester. And first, I just want to talk a little bit about city growth and about the city. I've lived in Manchester for over 20 years. I moved here from upstate New York, originally lived in Hooksett and Londonderry, and then moved back to New York, and then I moved back here again because I love New Hampshire so much. But I've owned my house on Parker Street for 20 years, and I lived in Manchester prior to that. I've seen Manchester go through quite a bit of change myself just in the time I've lived here. Things change, and we are a city. Even though we may not grow by 10-20% or any crazy numbers like that, we are continually growing in population, and there's always this concern about a fine balance between commercial properties and residential properties and rental properties versus single family homes and whatnot, and affordable housing versus housing for certain aspects of our community. And it seems like more and more, anytime there's any talk of any sort of development, it seems like more and more people just seem to be anti anything. And I don't mean that to be negative. It just seems to be, maybe it's because we are a city and we're a pretty full city. There isn't a whole lot of vacant land left in Manchester. And quite honestly, having come from places that were far more compact, lived in places where there was far denser communities, I'm not sure that I ever expected Manchester, a city of 110,000 people, I believe it is, to ever, be like one of the rural neighboring towns. Manchester isn't Bedford. It's not Goffstown. It's not Hooksett. It's not Londonderry. It's a city. We have our fair share of city problems. We have a significant problem with drug abuse and drug overdoses, and that impacts taxes in the city. We may have a disproportionate level of crime, but crime tends to be higher in cities than in towns. I don't know the exact statistics, but I'm just saying, when you live in a city, you expect to have city things. When we made our decision to buy the house we're living in now, we had a trade-off. We could move further outside of Manchester and further out into the country, and there would be pluses and pros and cons to that. Yes, you might have more land, or you might be more secluded, but I also wouldn't be able to walk to work. I also wouldn't be able to go to the grocery store, 3-4 times a week because it's just right up the road. I wouldn't be able to, wave to my neighbors when they walk by at my house and chat on the street. There's a lot of things to be said, good and bad, for living in any city. And in our case, the pros outweighed the cons. We like living in the city. We've found that we can live in the city, and when we want to venture out on the weekend, we can just go a little bit outside the city limits, and we're very much in the country. So anyways, back to the article that was in the paper this week. I read the article, and it talked about Lucas Road. I didn't know where Lucas Road is. Most of you probably don't know where, half the streets in Manchester are. I know I don't claim to know where all the streets in Manchester are. And it was about how a developer was going to develop townhouses in the area, and it was going to impact this Lucas Road, which has been, is got all sorts of wildlife and outdoor space and all that stuff. And the way I originally read the article made it sound like there was going to be a development at the end of an existing road, that basically didn't have water and sewer and, was very woodsy, and it was practically in Londonderry. And they were going to build this townhouse development at the end of the road and cause upheaval to this entire road. And that was a little, offsetting. I don't know that, we should rezone things to change a road to that degree. And I posted on Facebook, people were commenting on it, and I was kind of playing the devil's advocate. Is it really wrong? So this morning I went and I was reading the actual report, because the planning and development department in the city does a whole study on how this might impact and what the abutting properties are and the zoning and whatnot. So a little background: the proposed development originally was 200 townhouses, individual townhouses. Not detached, though, so there might be like a clump of 5 and then another clump of 5. It's that number's since been reduced down to 165. They're not going to be located on Lucas Road. They're actually going to be located on South Mammoth Road, which I was a little surprised to learn after hearing about how upset the people on Lucas Road were. And this is way down on South Mammoth, below Demers Garden Center, below Corning Road, where you would go up to, Rosegate and all those places. South of that, so between there and what was the Yard Restaurant and the Executive Court and the Best Western, that little stretch, there currently, from what I could see, it looks like there's 2 single-family homes in that stretch of the road. There's Malloy Landscaping, which is a commercial property. Then there's these 2 single-family homes, and then there's there's 2 lots directly on Mammoth, and they connect to a lot that goes kind of behind those properties, probably butts up to the Malloy property that they're looking to develop. And the problem is that right now that those 3 parcels are actually zoned for single-family use, but yet right across the street from there is it's zoned residential suburban multifamily. So it's not out of the realm that that same neighborhood could be rezoned to multifamily. I'm not saying I'm for doing it or against doing it. I just don't think there should be crazy outrage at the idea that they're making something maybe be rezoned into residential suburban multifamily when the opposite side of the street is already zoned that way. In addition to the whether we're debating between single family and this residential suburban multifamily zoning, it's also adjacent to land that's zoned for industrial and commercial use. You've got there's one of the industrial parks on lower South Willow, so way down below where the airport is. That one of those industrial parks backs up to that part of South Mammoth Road, which is across the street from where these proposed townhouses are. So you've got commercial industrial property, you've got, the Executive Court and the Best Western and the Yard Restaurant, or whatever the Yard Restaurant's new name will be when they switch over to a brew pub, I understand. You got Malloy Landscaping right there. This is hardly, some simple single-family home right there, single-family neighborhood on South Mammoth Road. Now, like I said, I've lived in, Manchester for a long time, and I never really understood. I was always surprised when there was all these new additions added to South Mammoth Road. There's a couple little, cul-de-sacs and little circle streets, and they're built these big houses down there. And I remember thinking, why would you buy a house right on Mammoth Road like that? This is a busy road. This is bound to be developed. Apparently in this report that I was reading, it even indicates that the city master plan expected that these properties probably would likely get zoned residential suburban multifamily at some point. So this isn't really something that is a total surprise. We are a city of 110,000 people. One of the constant things you read about, if you're really actually listening to what people are saying, is part of the reason why we have a hard time retaining younger people is they don't have housing that fits their needs. A lot of young people don't want to buy a little house in, a little ranch house in a little neighborhood. They want to live on Elm Street. They want to live in townhouses. They want to live where they don't have to take care of the property, and something that they can, they also want to rent, and rent nice places. They might not necessarily want to rent the same type of places that I was renting 20, 30 years ago. They don't want to necessarily live on the second floor of a 3-floor tenement on the west side of Manchester. They rent up in Ward 12, up in all the development that was up there. I mean, there's new development that didn't exist before. I'm sure it was a change for the people in Ward 12. I mean, all the talk of changing 293's exit 6 and 7, that's going to impact people in that area too. Should we never consider changing the highway because it might impact somebody's, commute to the, to the grocery store, or their traffic on their street might change. Change happens, and I think we have to try to be objective about how we're going to adapt to change, and whether we're going to constantly be resistant to change, or whether we're just going to make sure that whatever change is going to happen is going to be best for the community as a whole. Now, I did go back and look, somebody asked me why I would even care about an issue over in that part of Manchester. As you know, I'm running for alderman over in Ward 10, and this is obviously not my neighborhood. I'm fairly confident that pretty much all the space in Ward 10 is taken up by houses. Even still, there's a house on... There was a lot on South Main Street that just had a garage that recently was put up for sale, and I noticed that had been taken down, and I presume there's going to be a house put in there. Well, it was kind of nice that there was these couple big lots in a row right there on South Main Street. But unless I want to buy up that property to decide what to be done with it, somebody else is going to come along, and their vision of what should be done with that property might be different than what I think should be done with that property. But back to why I care about it. One, I care a lot about Manchester. I like to see us make smart decisions. I like to see us do things that will benefit the community as a whole, not just one developer, not just one street. And I did do some looking, and I was a little taken aback. Now, the reason people on Lucas Street are the ones at the forefront of this, if you read the Union Leader article, is some of their properties. I really only think it was 2 of their properties, but I could have been mistaken when I was looking at the mapping online. They butt up to the property that would include these townhouses. So they're not on Mammoth Road, they're on the road over there. Now, they're still that road appears to be very, I wouldn't say secluded, but it is more rural than not. And I don't see how townhouses on Mammoth Road are going to make this whole entire road not rural. The couple properties that do back up to this parcel might feel some impact. But you knew that there was a large parcel. When you look at the map, when you buy a house, when there's a large parcel of vacant land next to it, I don't care how it's zoned, I think I would always know in the back of my head that there's a chance that the zoning could get changed, because it's a city. When you're buying property in a city, every square foot of the city you eventually probably gets absorbed. So I did look back, because I was wondering, about whether this is equitable for people in Manchester. I know there is a big concern. A lot of people throw around the term workforce housing, which is not something that I'm necessarily supportive of, because I don't want to I'm not looking to bring more people at the lower end of the economic scale to Manchester. We have our fair share of people who need assistance already. Lower income families, families with, many children, they all cost the taxpayers, additional funds. And there is some concern when you say you're going to build 165 units. Well, how many kids is that going to put in our school system? Well, in this report I read, they were talking about this same developer had built a couple developments in Ward 12, and that actually there were very few kids that came out of them. Now, there's another group of townhouses that already exist right near where they want to build these as well, which is kind of also ironic. Now, that's Willowbrook townhouses, and from what I could see online, they're all 2-bedroom condos. It's not like we're building these big 4-bedroom, homes for families. 1- and 2-bedroom condos aren't going to attract big families. So I'm not 100% sure that the concern over the burden on the schools is enough to stop development. Then there's always concern about can the fire department handle this? Can the police department handle this, etc. And, those are legitimate questions. Is these 165 townhouses could generate about $600,000 in tax dollars for Manchester every year. Considering we struggle every year with our budget, I don't know that we should be turning a blind eye to $600,000 a year. Now, when somebody develops land like that, there's impact fees. I think it's like $633 per unit for the schools, and then there's an impact fee for the fire department and things like that. So in addition to the $600,000, there's a chunk of money that would happen up front, that one-time money for impact fees, which is supposed to help adjust the needs. Now, like I said, knowing the cost benefit, the tax benefit versus the impact on our costs for our fire and police and teachers, that's a legitimate question. I couldn't find any information out. I didn't see anything. I also don't know what range of price these type of townhouses are. Are we talking? Alderman Lavasser mentioned that he heard it was $1,800 a month type townhouses. This is not low income housing. This is where young couples want to live. This is where people who are new to the area and haven't yet maybe found a house or don't necessarily want to buy a house because they don't want the responsibility of that. They might want to buy or rent in a townhouse, and that's the type of people, young professional people, who we want to attract to Manchester. Now back to Lucas Avenue. I started looking at some of the properties on the Manchester GIS. You can go out to Google Manchester GIS, like George, India, Sam. And you can go in and you can see a map of all the parcels in the whole city. And you can zoom in and you can see which parcels about which ones. In particular, just so you know, these 3 parcels that they're looking at developing are maps 797 lots 3A, 4, and 9. 3A and 4 are on South Mammoth Road, and 9 runs from the back of those properties over to the back of property owned by Malloy Landscaping. So they kind of go around those 2 single-family homes there on South Mammoth Road. But looking at Lucas Ave, because everybody's talking about these properties that people bought, and there are some people who bought in the not so distant past, very $300,000 to $400,000 homes. Personally, I don't know that I'd ever pay $400,000 for a home in Manchester, but I do that. If I was going to spend $400,000 on a home, I think it'd be on a lake somewhere. But there was a couple properties that stood out. Now there's a particular 3 properties owned by the same family of people. And they were the people mentioned in the newspaper article. And in the newspaper article, they said that they own 51 acres. I could find 3 parcels when I looked quickly. One was 26 acres with a 2,240 square foot house on it. That's valued at $298,000, with a tax bill just under $7,000 a year. There's another parcel that is just about 4¼ acres, just under 4¼ acres, valued at $235,000 with a house of 1,344 square feet. And then there's a third parcel that's about 2.55 acres, has no house, which is valued at $115. Now, the $115 2.55 acres, they pay about, according to the city website anyways, it looks like they're paying about $2.66 a year in property taxes. So that's about $1 an acre a year. Now granted, vacant lots don't necessarily use services, so okay. I couldn't find a tax bill on the 4.18 acre. It said it had a yield tax, which I'm trying to find out if that means something to do with timber yield or if there was something else. I really don't know what that means, so that's a new thing for me. And then the large 26-acre property, like I said, was paying about $6,900 a year in taxes, which is a lot in taxes, but it's also 26 acres. So, I mean, if this family, I mean, that it's their prerogative. I don't want to make it sound like I'm jealous of the fact that they've got, I don't know, somewhere between 35 and 51 acres according to the newspaper. That good for them. I don't care if you live in a mansion. I don't care if you live in a shack. I don't care about any of that stuff. Whatever you choose to purchase and you have the ability to purchase, more power to you. But that said, I can't see how a condo development, not even on that road, on an adjacent road, that's going to generate $600,000 for the city, which helps everybody in the city, which does help people in Ward 10 because that's money that we don't have to necessarily fund, is something that we should oppose. Now, just to put things into perspective, I looked on, so if they're paying about what do we get? We'll just go with the 26-acre lot. If they're paying $7,000 a year and they're saying in the paper, well, we don't get any services, they just pick up our trash once a week. Well, they probably plow your road, and the fire department will come when you call them, and the police will come if you call them, which are exactly the same services I get on Varney Street. They only come up the road to pick up my trash. They plow the street. Granted, my road's in better condition, but my road also has a ton of traffic on it. It's a major thoroughfare, so that's the way roads get fixed. The ones that get used the most get the most attention. If Lucas Road gets no traffic other than the people that live on it, it's probably very far down on the priority scale. Of course, maybe Tommy Katziantonis, who's been the alderman there for a while, should be paying attention to his constituents on Lucas Road and getting their road fixed if it's in such disrepair. But that's another day's discussion. So I looked at our property on Varney Street, which we have about a third of an acre. We don't have a huge lot. For Manchester, it's a good-sized lot, but it's hardly, anything near 26 acres. They're paying about $7,000 for their trash pickup, according to them. Well, we're paying about $4,600 for our trash pickup, and I only have a third of an acre to surround myself with, wildlife on. And I did look to see if there were other properties in my ward, that were bigger, that maybe abut Bedford, because those properties down on Lucas Road, they butt right up to Londonderry. They're so close to Londonderry, I think they'd like to think that they're in Londonderry, but they're still in Manchester. They're still in a city of 110,000 people. Anyways, I glanced, there's a property up on Rockland Avenue. It's a half an acre, again, tiny in comparison to size, valued at $203,900. They pay $4,600. So they have a half of an acre butting up to Bedford. They pay $4,600. Lucas Avenue is 26 acres, and they're paying $7,000. That's a little. I don't know if that's fair or not. I mean, are we talking about literal services? Because how is it that a house with a half an acre is valued at $203,000, and this house on Lucas Ave, which I'm confident is larger because I know which house is on Rockland, with 26 acres is only valued at $298. So, you got to wonder sometimes how the tax bills get assigned and whatnot. And again, I found another property on Plymouth, same thing, valued at $245, half an acre. They're paying $5,600 a year in taxes too. So while I do feel for the people that may be impacted if this zoning change happens, I also know that I live in a city of 110,000 people. I expect that pretty much every property, every vacant property in Manchester at some point probably will have some sort of building on it. When I get tired of living in Manchester and I get tired of having the benefits of living in a city, when it becomes too congested for me, that, like I said, that's when I'll spend the money and go live on a lake someplace. But until then, I'm trying to be realistic about my expectations about change in Manchester. So enough about that. I do want to talk about some quick things about what's going on in Manchester. I did want to mention that we went to Pint Public House again on Elm Street this weekend. And if you've never eaten there and you want to, especially if you want to stop for a quick bite, they have these things called oinkers. If you like chicken wings, these are like chicken wings, but they're pork, and they are delicious. It's like, I think it's $11 for 8 of them or whatever. Delicious, delicious, delicious. Definitely worth a stop. I did want to mention that the TD Bank Summerfest concert series has started. That's Thursday at 7 p.m. at Veterans Park. This Thursday, July 27th, we have the Army Rock Band, and next week, August 3rd, we have Manchuka. Again, that's Thursday, 7 p.m., Veterans Park, obviously free. Also on Saturday, July 29th, we have the Livin' Free Fest in Veterans Park from 4 to 9:30. There's music, food, and crafts. Again, it's free. And also in Victory Park on Thursdays, July through August 24th, free. We have yoga in Victory Park from 3 to 3:45 p.m. These three, information on all these different events can be found at intownmanchester.com, and like I said, those are all free. I also want to remind people about the Farmers Market on Concord Street on Thursdays from 3 to 6:30. You can get information about that at manchesternhfarmersmarket.com. StarkPark.com, you can get information about the free concert series they have there on Sundays in the summer. This Sunday, July 30th, they have the New Legacy Swing Band and from 2 to 4. And next week, August 6th, they have the High Range Band, which is some folks, roots, bluegrass type music. That's a great way to get out and sit relax on a Sunday afternoon, listen to some great music. StarkPark.com. And I also want to mention on Saturdays at 8 in the morning, they have yoga at Doris Park up in the North End. And AmuskegFishways.org, they're continuing their Saturday Nature Seekers series. In July, it's all about New Hampshire turtles. You can always get more information at AmuskegFishways.org or any events going on in and around Manchester at nh365.org. Lastly, I want to tell you about two events coming up. One is on Monday, August 7th, the Manchester Republican Committee will have its Tiki fundraiser at Casey's Rib Shack. Tickets are just $45, and if you go out to manchestergop.com and you follow the link to Eventbrite, if you use the discount code MANCH, M-A-N-C-H, you can take $5 off your ticket. I'll run that through this weekend. Also, one last thing, artjambridgefest.com, sponsored by WZID on Saturday, September 23rd. I know it's a ways off, but if you know anybody who's an artist who wants to show off their artwork, or if you want to go check out artwork, you'll be able to see it on Bridge Street. I think this benefits one of the addiction recovery groups. That'll be Saturday, September 23rd, 10 to 3, artjambridgefest.com. And lastly, I want to wish best of luck today to former Senator and hopefully Senator-elect David Booten in his special election for the New Hampshire Senate District 16 seat. I'll fill you in next week on if he won and what the results on that race were. That's all I have for this week. If you have any input, especially if it's something I talked about today, if you have any input on development in Manchester, on city growth, on if we should never grow anything, email me at manchtalk@gmail.com. That's one word, manchtalk@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter at ManchTalk, all one word. That's all I've got. I look forward to coming back next week, and I think it'll be just about time to start introducing you to some of the great candidates that'll be running in Manchester this year. Have a great weekend. Hopefully the sun comes back and we have some more great summer weather coming up soon. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.